Chances are your grass is greener on the underside of those brown, dried blades.
When you look at this, you normally say, oh, it's all dead and all. It really isn't. But if you rub it really hard, you can actually see that it's still alive. Now this is zoysia grass, and zoysia grass is very cold tolerant.
So it just needs to shed its dead blades of grass because you've got this healthy green blades underneath.
The record-setting snow that blanketed much of Louisiana froze many lawns and plants. The good news, all that snow insulated the roots of many plants, minimizing frostbite. If your azaleas, camellias, crepe myrtles, irises, and roses look like they've lost their blooms, LSU Ag Center horticulturalist Ed Bush says chances are they'll sprout new buds in due time. Case in point, this azalea plant.
You know, the temperatures got down to a single digit in Baton Rouge, which really isn't common. But what I'm seeing here is the flowers were burned and damaged. Actually, they died, but the leaves are perfectly fine.
Okay.
So yes, we did lose our flowers. We probably won't get another bloom till later or next year, but the plant is fine. So we're just gonna leave the plant alone, and we're gonna wait until probably February, and then we're gonna prune, and all those unsightly flowers will fall, and new leaves and flush, we'll fertilize it. It'll be 100%.
Ed is taking me on a tour of the LSU Ag Center Botanic Gardens at Birding Museum and Gardens to share tips for helping plants survive and thrive after Louisiana's recent snowstorm.
In general, did most Louisiana outdoor plants and shrubbery fare okay during
In general, many did. Tropicals didn't. Some tender citrus, like limes and lemons, and even satsumas may have had critical damage. But overall, it came out pretty good, mainly because it was a wet cold. And having that blanket of snow really makes a difference.
So it almost worked like an insulator.
That, and also in this situation, if we look up, you can see the trees, and we call this a microclimate.
It's early February, less than 2 weeks after Louisiana's snowfall, and much of the garden grounds look brown with color peeking through. The landscape is a mix of freeze-damaged and hardy plants.
So let's talk about tips to winterize your plants and your landscaping, because winter's not over. There could be another cold snap for all we know.
One thing I really suggest to people is if you can mulch. But the next thing is to water before a freeze. A dry cold could be a lot more damaging than a wet cold. So I always tell people water before you wrap your faucets. Water them really well. If you can bring in tropicals, bring them inside or in a garage. That's really good. And then if you can't, and if you have something like a citrus tree or something that's tender and could freeze, maybe if you could cover it or protect it in some kind of way, that would help the plant survive.
The snow froze camellia blooms, canceling the annual Camellia Show held in early February and hosted by the Baton Rouge Camellia Society. The southern ornamental plants survived, but growers didn't have flowers to compete in the annual Camellia contest.
So here we have a Camellia japonica. It's a little more cold sensitive. We call it tender, which means it's a little more susceptible to cold. And you can notice that unfortunately, we lost a few of the flowers. And it's really upsetting a little bit when you wait all year and they're blooming and it freezes. But it's okay, because here we have a new bud coming. So we probably lost these buds for 2 or 3 weeks, but then we're probably gonna see some new buds. And there may be a little speck or two on it.
Tropical plants didn't fare so well during the freeze. This banana plant looks lifeless, but Ed advises having patience with pruning the dead leaves because it could prematurely cut off viable tissue, stunting growth. Plus, the remaining stems help protect plants from more cold weather damage.
These are very tender, they're tropical, and they're ornamental types, and some of them are really collector's items. They have some hybrids that are worth a little bit of money. So in the future, don't be shocked if you get cold damage. It's very common.
We end our tour at a flower bed unscathed by the snow. It's an example of strategic plant purchasing, planning, and cultivation.
I love their bed preparation. They mounded it up, good drainage. They selected really good species, sasanquas that are really tough. And look at the flowers. This is after snow and ice, and these are adapted. This is what happens when you choose the right plants for the location. And they mulched it well. They have irrigation. So I look at all those things, and when you do that, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And that's what I like. I like choosing plants that are well adapted for the site that you plant them.
In a few weeks, it's time to prune the rose bushes, and soon spring arrives, greening gardens and lawns again. The growing cycle reminds us all that every plant has a season, and cold snaps, they can be Mother Nature's way of keeping it all in balance.
The cold wasn't a bad thing for all plants. That we really needed some chilling hours, like for blueberries and for persimmon and peaches. And those plants, they need something called chilling hours. And without those, we may not get fruit. So it wasn't all bad. It may not have felt good to us. We might have had fun playing in it, but for plants, it's actually essential for some species. So yeah, we got some damage on some plants, but for some plants, it actually was a good thing.
Support provided by Prevention on the Go from Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. Mobile screenings for prostate, breast, skin, and colorectal cancers available for all throughout Louisiana. More under Schedule a Screening at marybird.org.